BBC World News, get up to date with the latest business, economic and market reports from the world's financial centres in World Business Report.
HSBC says profits rose 10% in the first 6 months of the year, but the bank's chairman says he may need to raise bankers' salaries to stay competitive. A win for Apple in the patent wars as President Obama vetoes a ban on some Apple products. Samsung vows to appeal against the decision. A very warm welcome to World Business Report. I'm Lesley Curwen. In a minute we'll have more on Apple, but first, profits at HSBC rose by 10% in the first half of this year to over $14 billion. Europe's biggest bank has benefited from a massive fall in costs, thanks to a restructuring which involved the loss of 40,000 jobs and the disposal of some of its businesses. But HSBC's chairman, Douglas Flint, warned that new EU regulations capping bank bonuses could put HSBC in an uncomfortable situation. And he's considering raising salaries to combat the new rules and to remain competitive. Well, with me now is Richard Hunter, Head of Equities at stockbroker Hargreaves Lansdown. Richard, doesn't this in some ways make a mockery of the EU banking regulations if bonuses are going down but salaries are going up?
Well, of course, for some time the banking industry has been a global one. Regulators around the world have recognised that what we can't have is a repeat of the 2008 financial crisis. Unfortunately, as things currently stand, they're each choosing to deal with preventing such a recurrence in their own way. So, yes, the EU is the second biggest trading bloc in the world, but of course the US, for example, you've got that as the largest economy. So what HSBC are basically saying is we deal in just about every global economy. What these rules could mean is to make us uncompetitive in certain areas. So on that basis alone, it does on face value rather undermine what the EU is trying to do, but on the other hand, it's understandable from a global perspective.
Do you think in this case it can be justified, really, that bankers' earnings will go up, at HSBC in particular?
Well, there's been all sorts of complaints made in the US about similar EU rules affecting the US banks which have chosen to land in Frankfurt, Milan or indeed London. Of course, they've got effectively overseas branches for a US bank, but they're now being capped by EU rules which may have nothing to do with the way that the US want their own market to go. At some point, the regulators are going to have to get together and come to some sort of commonality, because otherwise all you will see, as you've seen to some small extent so far, is bankers and banks moving people around to those jurisdictions which obviously are less punitive.
So give us an idea of how well HSBC is doing compared to other global banks.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily appreciate it from the share price reaction today. That was probably the most surprising thing about the results. The shares were down 4.5% or 5% most of the day. But you have to say, particularly set against some of the recent UK bank results we've seen over the last couple of weeks, Barclays, Lloyds and RBS, the figures remain safe and dependable, and arguably that's what investors in UK banks really want at the moment. Costs were indeed down, bad loans or impairments were down, their capital cushion remains extremely robust, their return on capital was improved, and of course profits were improved as well. And on top of all this, unlike some of its competitors, they're paying a dividend yield of over 4%, and that's attractive to income investors given the current low interest rate environment.
OK, so pretty rosy picture really. Richard Hunter, Head of Equities at Hargreaves Lansdown, thanks very much indeed. Ahead of those financial results, HSBC asked more than 40 embassies, consulates and high commissions in the UK to close their accounts as part of a programme to reduce business risks. According to the Mail on Sunday, the High Commission of Papua New Guinea and the Honorary Consulate of Benin are among the diplomatic customers told to bank elsewhere. Here's our business correspondent, Joe Lynham.
Despite diplomatic immunity and gleaming limos, some consuls are struggling to open a bank account. HSBC, according to the Mail on Sunday, has asked almost 40 embassies, consuls and high commissions to find another bank. HSBC said that it had been applying a rolling programme of assessments to all its businesses and that its services for embassies were no exception. Last year it emerged that Mexican drug cartels had been using the bank to launder their money. That earned HSBC a reprimand from the US Senate, a record fine of £1.3 billion and the promise of wholesale reform. The man who should have spotted the problem also tendered his resignation.
Now is the appropriate time for me and for the bank for someone new to serve as the head of group compliance.
The Papua New Guinea High Commission is one of the diplomatic missions in London that HSBC has told to basically take their business elsewhere. Others reportedly include Benin and the Vatican. And to make matters worse, some of these places are struggling to find banks elsewhere that will accept them. So much so that the Foreign Office has issued a letter of introduction to help them find a new bank. While that might be causing diplomatic havoc for innocent customers, some banks will probably feel that's a price worth paying as they clamp down on suspected worldwide money laundering. Joe Lynham, BBC News.
Apple has scored a goal in its continuing patent battle against Samsung. President Obama has stepped in to veto a decision by the International Trade Commission that would have banned the import or sale of some iPhones and some iPads in the US by AT&T. It's a rare move by the White House and the first time since 1987 that a US administration has vetoed a product ban made by the trade panel. Samsung says it will appeal against the decision. Mariko Oy is at the New York Stock Exchange covering this story for us. Mariko, how big a victory is this?
Well, this came as a surprise to many people. As you say, this is a very rare move by the US government. I should emphasize, though, that this is just one of many patent disputes that the two companies are involved in. But this particular case is related to the 3G wireless technology, which Mr. Obama's trade representative says should be available to all companies across the industry. He also cited a possible impact on competition of the industry as a reason of lifting this ban. Shares of Samsung fell in Asia overnight, and we're now seeing shares of Apple rising about 1% despite all the markets are down at the moment.
So how does this fit into the bigger picture of Apple versus Samsung?
Well, this is, as I said, one of many disputes, and now everyone will be focusing on the International Trade Commission's decision on whether Samsung infringed a patent of Apple. We're expecting the decision on Friday. But while it seems like it's all bad news for Samsung, some analysts say that this is actually great publicity for the South Korean company, because through all these disputes, consumers actually got to learn that the technologies used in Samsung's products are quite similar to that of Apple. So not exactly just all bad news, but having said that, the South Korean government voicing concerns over what they call the protectionism of the US administration.
Mariko Oy, thanks very much indeed. In other news, BMW's joint venture in China has voluntarily recalled over 140,000 vehicles in the country. It said a defect in the steering system could prove to be a safety hazard, a big blow for the German automaker, which is trying to keep up in the competitive Chinese market amid a slowdown in the luxury sector. The New York Times company has agreed to sell the Boston Globe. Boston Red Sox owner John Henry is set to pay $70 million in cash for the title. The price is a fraction of the $1.1 billion the New York Times paid for the Boston Globe back in 1993. And a very quick look at the markets. We've seen record highs, but today a bit of a lull after lots of data out last week. That's it from me for now. I'll be back with more business later.